On the 12th of April, 1961, a Soviet Air Force pilot, Yuri Gagarin, became the first human to blast into space.
On the 12th of April, 1961, Yuri Gagarin etched his name into history as the first human to journey into space. His was one of the many stunning accomplishments that put the Soviet Union at the top spot in the space race. Aboard the Vostok 1, Gagarin orbited Earth, extending humanity's reach beyond our planet. However, while this mission was a monumental success and Gagarin became a Soviet space hero, his life was cut tragically short. The official narrative insists that he died in an accident. However, the details of his passing are complicated by the fact that before his death, the first human in space, Yuri Gagarin, finally admitted to something that certain powerful individuals were not all too pleased with. But to make any sense of things, we must start from the very beginning. Early life and background. Born on March 9, 1934, Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin opened his eyes in the quiet village of Klushino in the Smolensk Oblast, in what was then the Soviet Union. Little did his parents know that this boy was destined for greatness. His early years, however, were far from glamorous. The Gagarin family, modest and humble, lived a life rooted in the rhythms of the Soviet countryside. Yuri's father, Alexei Ivanovich, worked as a carpenter, while his mother, Anna Timofeyevna, was a dairy farmer. Yuri, the third of 4 children, was raised in a tightly knit family that shared a deep bond, forged in the fires of hardship. However, things took an even darker turn when the Nazis invaded. The Gagarin family, like so many others, became victims of the brutal German occupation. Klushino fell to the Nazis on October 18, 1941, and with it, much of the normalcy that had once existed. The German forces targeted the village with unforgiving brutality. They set fire to the local school, and after this, they burnt 27 houses to the ground, including the Gagarins' home. The family was forced to build a small mud hut behind their house, just 3 by 3 meters in size. This makeshift home became their refuge for 21 months. Life under occupation was grueling. Yuri's family was coerced into performing back-breaking labor to sustain the Nazi occupation forces. Those who dared resist faced violence and imprisonment. In early 1943, Yuri's 2 older siblings, Valentin and Zoya, were forcibly deported to Poland by the Germans for slave labor. The family believed they were lost forever, and Yuri, racked with grief and malnourished from hunger, fell into a dark place. His health deteriorated, and he spent much of the war in and out of hospitals. His mother, who had been injured by a German soldier's scythe, was also hospitalized for a time. Yet despite these unthinkable trials, the Gagarins clung to each other with an unbreakable bond. As the German occupation finally began to collapse in 1944, Yuri was among those who helped the Red Army by uncovering the mines that had been buried in the roads by the retreating Nazi forces. The family was slowly reunited after the war, with Valentin and Zoya returning home in 1945, though the scars of their forced labor remained with them for years. However, in a world ravaged by war and deprivation, where dreams of adventure seemed impossibly distant, Yuri's determination to rise above his circumstances would set him on a path that would change history forever, building a foundation for the future. In 1946, the Gagarin family relocated to the town of Gzhatsk, where Yuri's educational journey took a pivotal turn. The town, still recovering from the ravages of the war, had limited resources, and the school they enrolled in was a makeshift building with no proper infrastructure. But it was here that Yuri's educational foundation was laid. The school was run by a young, idealistic woman who had volunteered her services as the town's teacher. Since there were no textbooks or educational materials, the children learned to read from a discarded Soviet military manual. In this humble setting, Yuri's curiosity flourished, particularly in math and science, which were taught by a former Soviet airman who had joined the school to help the children. From an early age, Gagarin had shown an unusual interest in flight. This passion was further ignited during the war when a Yakovlev fighter plane made an emergency crash landing in Klushino. The sight of the aircraft left a lasting impression on the young boy. His imagination was captured by the very idea of soaring above the Earth. This fascination led him to join a group of local children who spent their free time building model airplanes. At the age of 16, in 1950, Gagarin's life took another significant turn. Seeking to support his family and further his education, he moved to Lyubertsy, a town near Moscow, where he began an apprenticeship at a steel plant. There, Gagarin worked as a foundryman. Simultaneously, he enrolled in a young workers' evening school, which allowed him to continue his studies while working at the plant. In 1951, Gagarin graduated with honors, completing both the 7th grade and vocational school curriculum, specializing in mold making and foundry work. But Gagarin's heart was never far from the skies. While working in the steel plant, he did not lose sight of his passion for aviation. His dreams of flying became more tangible when he moved to Saratov for further training at the Industrial Technical School. There, he specialized in tractors, a far cry from his dreams of becoming a pilot. But it was in Saratov that he also began volunteering at the local flying club, where he trained as a Soviet air cadet, learning to fly a biplane before moving on to the more advanced Yakovlev Yak-18. Gagarin also took on a part-time job as a dock laborer on the Volga River. This job, though physically demanding, provided him with extra income, which was essential for a young man trying to make ends meet while working toward his dreams. By the time he completed his training and earned his wings, Yuri Gagarin had already proven himself to be a fighter, not just in the air, but in life. His passion for flight, combined with his work ethic and tenacity, would propel him into the history books, eventually leading him to the Vostok 1 spacecraft, where he would become the first human to journey into outer space. Fate, as it turns out, favored the ambitions of Yuri Gagarin. In 1955, he was accepted into the prestigious 1st Chkalov Higher Air Force Pilot School in Orenburg. The path to becoming a pilot was never an easy one, and Gagarin faced challenges right from the start. Initially, he began his training on the Yak-18, a familiar aircraft. However, his true test came when he graduated to the MiG-15, a more advanced and demanding aircraft. He twice struggled to land the MiG-15, and the mistakes put his place in the program in jeopardy. However, fate had different plans for Gagarin. Recognizing his potential, the commander of the regiment decided to give him another chance. His instructor, understanding the issue, provided Gagarin with a cushion to sit on, helping him gain a better view of the cockpit. With this simple change, Gagarin was able to land the aircraft successfully. By 1957, Gagarin had successfully completed his evaluation in the trainer aircraft, and with renewed confidence, he began flying solo. It wasn't long before he was promoted to the rank of lieutenant on the 5th of November 1957. By this time, he had accumulated 166 hours and 47 minutes of flight time. The following day, he graduated from flight school and was immediately assigned to the Luostari Air Base, located near the Norwegian border in Murmansk Oblast. There, he spent 2 years as part of the Northern Fleet, flying with the 769th Fighter Aviation Regiment. He spent long hours in the sky, honing his skills as a fighter pilot, and by October 1959, he had accumulated an impressive 265 flight hours. It was during this time that Gagarin's interest in space exploration took off. On the 6th of October 1959, when the Soviet Union launched the Luna 3 spacecraft, which sent back the first photographs of the far side of the moon, Gagarin became captivated by the idea of space travel. His enthusiasm for space exploration did not go unnoticed. Lieutenant Colonel Babushkin, a key figure in the Soviet Air Force, endorsed Gagarin's interest in joining the space program and submitted a recommendation on his behalf. By the time he was promoted to senior lieutenant on the 6th of November 1959, Gagarin was ready for a new challenge. Though the selection process was rigorous and highly competitive, Gagarin's combination of extraordinary piloting skills, resilience, and newfound passion for space exploration made him an ideal candidate. The journey that began in a small village in Smolensk and led Gagarin to the heights of the Soviet Air Force was about to take an even more extraordinary turn. Training for the first human spaceflight. Yuri Gagarin first faced an intense selection and training process. The Central Flight Medical Commission, headed by Major General Konstantin Fyodorovich Borodin, was responsible for ensuring the candidates met the stringent physical and psychological requirements for spaceflight. The selection process took place at the Central Aviation Scientific Research Hospital in Moscow. The criteria were strict, limiting candidates to pilots between 25 and 30 years of age, with a weight requirement of no more than 72 kilograms or 159 pounds and a maximum height of 5 feet 7 inches. At 5 feet 2 inches, Gagarin perfectly fit these physical constraints, making him an ideal candidate. From an initial pool of 154 pilots nominated by various Air Force units, the Medical Commission narrowed it down to 29 cosmonaut candidates. Out of these, 20 were selected by the Soviet government's Credential Committee, with the first 12 approved on the 7th of March 1960. Gagarin was among this elite group. Training for Gagarin and his fellow cosmonauts began in earnest on the 15th of March 1960 at the Kodinka airfield in Moscow. The regimen was grueling, with intensive physical training that Alexei Leonov, one of the original 12, likened to Olympic-level preparation. In addition to their regular training, the candidates were subjected to parachute exercises in Saratov Oblast, where they performed 40 to 50 jumps from various altitudes and conditions, including both land and water. Gagarin's peers respected him for his focus and determination, and in an anonymous vote among the candidates about who should be the first to fly, Gagarin was chosen by the overwhelming majority. On the 30th of May 1960, Gagarin was selected for the Vanguard 6, a special accelerated training group that would eventually produce the first cosmonauts for the Vostok mission. Despite Gagarin's lack of a higher education degree, he, like many of the other candidates, was enrolled in a correspondence course at the Zhukovsky Air Force Engineering Academy. Although he began his studies in September 1960, it would not be until early 1968 that he earned his specialist diploma. As part of the training, Gagarin endured various physiological and psychological tests designed to assess his endurance and reaction to extreme conditions. These included oxygen deprivation tests, where the cosmonauts were placed in isolation chambers with the air slowly pumped out, as well as centrifuge training to simulate the G-forces they would experience during the flight. Psychological assessments were equally rigorous. Gagarin was placed in an anechoic chamber, designed to create total isolation for 10 days, from the 26th of July to the 5th of August, 1960. During this period, Gagarin's personality was evaluated by a Soviet Air Force doctor who praised his modesty, sharp intellect, excellent memory, and quick reactions. The doctor also noted Gagarin's well-developed imagination, attention to detail, and ability to excel in complex subjects like celestial mechanics and higher mathematics. In January 1961, the Vanguard 6 were officially named pilot cosmonauts. They were subjected to a 2-day examination conducted by a special interdepartmental commission led by Lieutenant General Nikolai Kamanin. The first day of testing involved simulator exercises. Gagarin, along with fellow cosmonauts Titov, Nikolaev, and Popovich, performed exceptionally well during this evaluation. The second day featured written exams, after which Gagarin was ranked as the top candidate. He and the next two highest-ranked cosmonauts, Titov and Nelyubov, were sent to Tyuratam for final preparations. On the 7th of April 1961, Gagarin and Titov were selected to train with the flight-ready Vostok spacecraft. On the 8th of April 1961, at a State Commission meeting, Kamanin formally nominated Gagarin as the primary pilot for the Vostok mission, with Titov designated as his backup. The stage was now set for a historic flight that would make him a global icon and a hero of the Soviet Union. The Vostok 1 mission. On the 12th of April 1961, the world witnessed a monumental event in human history as the Vostok 1 spacecraft lifted off from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Aboard was Yuri Gagarin, the first human to journey into space, under the call sign Kedr, named after the Siberian pine or cedar tree, symbolizing strength and resilience. As the rocket ascended into the unknown, Gagarin's last words before launch, delivered in his trademark enthusiasm, would echo in history. He boldly proclaimed, "Off we go!" Following this, as the rocket ignited, 5 first-stage engines roared to life, propelling the spacecraft skyward. At the correct moment, the side boosters fell away, leaving the core engine to continue the journey. The core stage, upon completing its role, separated while the spacecraft was still on a suborbital trajectory. The upper stage then ignited, carrying Gagarin's spacecraft into orbit. After the upper stage completed its burn, it separated from the spacecraft, leaving Gagarin to orbit Earth for 108 minutes, making him the first human to do so. In his post-flight report, Gagarin described the strange sensation of weightlessness, which was vastly different from conditions on Earth. He noted that it felt as though he were floating, suspended in a horizontal position within the confines of his spacecraft. He even recounted a moment of lightheartedness during re-entry, singing "The Motherland Hears, the Motherland Knows," a patriotic song that would later become associated with his mission. At approximately 7,000 meters or 23,000 feet above the ground, Gagarin performed the pre-planned ejection from the capsule, deploying his parachute to ensure a safe landing. This moment, too, was carefully calculated, but it raised an issue for the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, or the FAI. The FAI required that the pilot land with the spacecraft to officially record the duration, altitude, and mass of the flight. Initially, Gagarin and the Soviet authorities kept quiet about the details of his landing, but the truth surfaced when Vostok 2, with Gagarin's fellow cosmonaut German Titov, completed its flight later that year. Despite this technicality, the FAI ultimately certified Gagarin's flight and revised its rules, recognizing the groundbreaking achievement: the first human spaceflight, the first orbit of Earth by a human, and the successful return to Earth, even if not directly in the spacecraft. Gagarin's flight was not only a triumph of Soviet space exploration, but a milestone for humanity as a whole. The world celebrated the unprecedented achievement of human space travel as Gagarin's name became forever etched in history. The 12th of April 1961 marked a defining moment not only for the Soviet space program, but also for the Soviet Union itself. Naturally, Gagarin became an icon of Soviet achievement, a symbol of technological prowess and the strength of the socialist state. His fame spread like wildfire, and his biography was published in newspapers worldwide, with extensive coverage detailing his pioneering flight. His hero's welcome in the Soviet Union was unparalleled, with a long motorcade of high-ranking officials escorting him through the streets of Moscow to the Kremlin. There, in a grand ceremony attended by top Soviet leaders, Nikita Khrushchev awarded Gagarin the prestigious title of Hero of the Soviet Union. Moreover, other cities across the Soviet Union hosted mass demonstrations in Gagarin's honor, rivaling the scale of World War II victory parades in terms of public enthusiasm and national pride. The scale of Gagarin's celebrity only grew after his flight. With his infectious smile and natural charisma, he quickly earned a reputation as a master of public relations. His ability to connect with people, both at home and abroad, made him one of the most recognizable faces of the Soviet Union. On the 15th of April 1961, just days after his flight, Gagarin held a press conference in Moscow, where he answered questions from a crowd of about 1,000 reporters. In the months that followed, he embarked on a whirlwind tour across the globe, where he was welcomed as a symbol of Soviet achievement. He traveled to the United Kingdom, where he visited London and Manchester. Despite the pouring rain, Gagarin's unwavering commitment to connecting with the people shone through. He famously refused an umbrella, insisting that the roof of his convertible car remain open so that the crowds could catch a glimpse of him. Gagarin's travels took him to 30 countries, including Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada, Cuba, Czechoslovakia, Finland, Hungary, and Iceland, within the first 4 months after his flight. His global tour made him an ambassador for the Soviet Union. However, Gagarin's extraordinary popularity was not without its complications. In an era of Cold War tensions, U.S. President John F. Kennedy barred Gagarin from visiting the United States. Despite the ban, Gagarin's global fame continued to soar, and his image as the first man in space would remain a central symbol of Soviet space superiority throughout the 1960s. In 1962, Yuri Gagarin's life took on new directions as he expanded his role within Soviet governance and the military. That year, he was elected as a deputy to the Soviet of the Union, one of the chambers of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR, and was also appointed to the Central Committee of the Young Communist League. His political career marked a new chapter in his life, but he remained connected to the Soviet space program. Gagarin returned to the cosmonaut training facility in Star City, where he dedicated several years to researching and designing a reusable spacecraft. Gagarin was promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Forces on the 12th of June 1962, and just over a year later, he earned the rank of colonel on the 6th of November 1963. By December 1963, Gagarin's leadership and technical abilities were further acknowledged when he was appointed Deputy Training Director of the Cosmonaut Training Facility, where he oversaw the preparation of future space explorers. Despite his rising prominence, Soviet officials expressed concern about Gagarin's involvement in future spaceflights. They viewed him as a symbol of Soviet achievement, too valuable to risk on a mission that might end in disaster. However, he traveled extensively and represented the Soviet Union at international events, including the 1965 Paris Air Show, where he met with U.S. Vice President Hubert Humphrey, French Prime Minister Georges Pompidou, and American astronauts Jim McDivitt and Ed White. 2 years after his initial election, Gagarin was re-elected as a deputy to the Soviet of Nationalities, the upper chamber of the Soviet legislature. During this time, he sought to re-qualify as a fighter pilot and even became the backup pilot for his close friend, Vladimir Komarov, on the Soyuz 1 mission in 1967. Despite the internal resistance, Gagarin remained a viable candidate for spaceflight. However, the political pressures surrounding the Soyuz 1 mission led to rushed preparations, and Gagarin, despite his protests, had to watch as his friend Komarov embarked on the mission. He was stationed at the launch site, providing vital communication between Komarov and ground control after the spacecraft began experiencing multiple system failures. Tragically, the mission ended in disaster when Soyuz 1 crash-landed due to a parachute failure, resulting in Komarov's death. The tragedy further sealed Gagarin's fate in the space program. After the Soyuz 1 accident, he was permanently banned from spaceflight. He was also grounded from solo flight operations and thus forced into a period of professional limbo. Despite these setbacks, Gagarin remained resilient. He focused on academics, devoting himself to aerospace engineering. In February 1968, Gagarin successfully defended his thesis on the aerodynamic configuration of spaceplanes at the Zhukovsky Air Force Engineering Academy, graduating cum laude. Although the dreams of further space exploration were no longer in reach for him, Gagarin continued to contribute to the Soviet space program from an academic and technical perspective. But there is another angle to his story: the life and death of a hero. In 1957, while still a cadet at the Soviet Air Force's flight school, Yuri Gagarin met Valentina Goryacheva, a graduate of Orenburg Medical School and a medical technician by profession. They soon fell head over heels in love and married on November 7, 1957, a day that also marked Gagarin's graduation from flight school. Their union was blessed with 2 daughters. Yelena Yurievna Gagarina, born in 1959, pursued a career in art history, and since 2001 has served as the Director General of the Moscow Kremlin Museums. Her sister, Galina Yurievna Gagarina, born in 1961, became a professor of economics and currently chairs the department at Plekhanov Russian University of Economics in Moscow. However, Gagarin's personal life was not without its challenges. In September 1961, while on holiday at a Black Sea resort, Gagarin was caught in an affair with a nurse who had previously assisted him following a boating incident. Apparently attempting to escape the scene, he leaped from a second-story window. This dramatic escape attempt resulted in a permanent scar above his left eyebrow. However, his marriage to Valentina remained intact, and their family continued to thrive, even as Gagarin's public image soared to new heights. However, on March 27, 1968, Yuri Gagarin tragically lost his life during a routine training flight at Chkalovsky Air Base. Gagarin was flying a MiG-15 UTI aircraft alongside his flight instructor, Vladimir Seryogin, when the plane crashed near Kerchak, a town located about 100 kilometers northeast of Moscow. The pair died in the crash, and their bodies were cremated before being interred in the walls of the Kremlin, where they remain to this day. Interestingly, the circumstances surrounding the crash have been shrouded in secrecy. At least 3 distinct inquiries into the crash were carried out, with the KGB's involvement especially contentious. In their report, declassified in 2003, the KGB suggested that multiple factors contributed to the crash, notably errors made by the airbase personnel. An outdated weather report was given to Gagarin, which led him to believe the conditions were clearer than they actually were. Furthermore, external fuel tanks had been left attached to the aircraft, which was against protocol for the planned training exercises. The KGB's investigation concluded that the aircraft likely entered a spin due to either a bird strike or a sudden maneuver to avoid another plane. Because of the incorrect weather report, the flight crew was unaware of their true altitude and was unable to correct the aircraft's trajectory in time. Another theory, which emerged in 2005, suggested that an air vent in the cockpit may have been left open, possibly leading to oxygen deprivation, which could have incapacitated the crew. A similar theory, published in Air and Space Smithsonian magazine, speculated that upon detecting the open vent, the crew executed a rapid descent to regain consciousness, but in doing so, they caused the plane to crash. Despite these theories, the Kremlin has consistently vetoed calls for a new investigation into Gagarin's death. In April 2007, government officials stated that there was no new evidence that warranted further inquiry. However, in April 2011, documents from a 1968 commission convened by the Central Committee of the Communist Party to investigate the incident were declassified. These documents revealed that the original findings concluded the crash occurred due to a sharp maneuver performed by Gagarin or Seryogin in an attempt to avoid either a weather balloon or to clear a cloud formation. This abrupt movement sent the MiG-15 UTI into a supercritical flight regime, causing it to stall under difficult meteorological conditions. One of the most notable individuals involved in the investigation was cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, who was conducting parachute training on the day of the crash. Leonov, who heard 2 loud booms from a distance, believes that a nearby Sukhoi Su-15 fighter jet, which was flying below its minimum altitude, inadvertently caused the MiG-15 UTI to spiral out of control. According to Leonov, the first boom he heard was the jet breaking the sound barrier, and the second boom was the sound of Gagarin's plane crashing to the ground. Whatever the case, the tragic death of Yuri Gagarin remains a topic of intense scrutiny, with the full truth behind the cause of the crash still veiled in uncertainty. Despite the official narrative, the mystery surrounding Gagarin's untimely death continues to captivate those who revere him as a hero. While this secret may never be fully revealed, another one has been opened for all: Yuri Gagarin's secret. Regarding Gagarin's spaceflight in 1961, it was widely reported that he made a remark during his flight, "I don't see any God up here." The Soviet Union took a step further and portrayed Gagarin as a figure who had seen the futility of religion. His publicly released autobiography was carefully crafted to align with the government's stance in this regard. In the book, Gagarin is quoted as expressing that the successful manned spaceflight was a crushing blow to the churchmen. The passage went on to describe letters from believers who, awed by Gagarin's achievements, renounced their faith. However, this narrative of Gagarin as an unwitting agent of Soviet propaganda was not the full truth of his personal beliefs, but rather a reflection of the political climate in which he lived. For starters, there is no concrete record of him saying this famous quote during his communication with Earth stations. In fact, Gagarin's close friend, Colonel Valentin Petrov, later revealed in a 2006 interview that Gagarin had never uttered those words. Petrov clarified that the quote had been misattributed and was in fact part of a speech by Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, who used it as part of an anti-religion campaign. Khrushchev had reportedly stated, "Gagarin flew into space but didn't see any God there." Gagarin, who had been baptized into the Russian Orthodox Church as a child, was known to have maintained a religious connection with his family. Before his spaceflight, he even baptized his elder daughter Yelena in the church, and his household continued to celebrate religious holidays such as Christmas and Easter. His personal life stood in contrast to the state's official atheism. Nonetheless, the Soviet Union hailed him as a national hero. His success was celebrated worldwide, starting with a grand parade in Moscow on April 14, 1961, followed by numerous prestigious honors from the Soviet Union, including the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, the Order of Lenin, and the Konstantin Tsiolkovsky Gold Medal. His recognition extended internationally, with awards from countries like Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Cuba, and Brazil, among others. Gagarin's legacy endures through annual celebrations like Cosmonautics Day, global tributes like Yuri's Night, and numerous honors including streets, towns, and institutions named after him. His memory also lives in space, with a lunar crater, a tribute on the Moon left by Apollo astronauts, and his induction into the International Space Hall of Fame. Across music, culture, and even sports, Gagarin's name symbolizes human progress and inspires generations of explorers and dreamers. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.